Ashes of War come in all shapes and sizes in Elden Ring. They can range anywhere from being pretty useful all the way to being a downright game changer. That's why today we'll take a look at 5 Ashes of War that have special mechanics, effects, or interactions that the game doesn't immediately make you aware of. So let's begin. But before we jump in, I'd like to give a big thanks to Star Trek Fleet Command for kindly sponsoring today's video. This is a highly addictive mobile strategy game filled with ships to command, bases to build, and enemies to conquer. You also get to unlock and upgrade notable characters from the series and even set them as your own commanders, including the ones from the brand new event called the Lower Decks. Now, Lower Decks gives you access to a lot of new content and rewards, including 30 new amazingly crafted story missions. Most important though, you're likely going to want to also unlock the brand new ship called the USS Cerritos, super useful for its buffing abilities. There's obviously a lot more you can check out in the new event, and if you jump in right now, there's still time for you to enjoy the limited time event in May that lets you replay events from the past with exciting new twists and cool new rewards. So totally check the game out using my links down below, and I'll give another thanks to Star Trek Fleet Command for kindly sponsoring today's video. Coming up to number 5, we have the all-amazing Sacred Order. This will imbue your weapon with holy powers for about 30 seconds, dealing extra holy damage, and it's also great at preventing the undead to completely respawn. But what makes it so special is the fact that it doesn't just buff your main weapon damage, but also any other weapon you might be holding in your other hand. Even though in this case the Ash of War that I've applied is only active on the primary weapon, you will notice that the damage buff actually works on the second one as well when I dual wield these. Yes, the actual holy buff won't visually appear on the second weapon as well, but it will definitely be noticeable when fighting enemies, and it's definitely there. What's awesome is the fact that this is free extra damage, which means it totally stacks on top of buffs like the Golden Vow or Flame Grant Me Strength. You can basically apply these buffs at the start of each fight, which already give you a nice damage bonus, but then just top it all off with a Sacred Order, which will massively boost that damage to new levels. Now, in order to find this, you need to head over to the abandoned coffin right here in the Altus Plateau, and then take the road just slightly to the northwest on the side of this big lake. There's going to be a roller beetle in the middle of the road, so just kill it, and that's how you get this Ash of War. But moving on to number 4, the next one is going to be Eruption. You get to slam your weapon menacingly into the ground and then lift up roiling lava to further damage enemies in front of you. What makes this Ash of War really special, outside of its ridiculously high damage, is the fact that it becomes even more insane once you couple it with something like a Blood Flame Blade or any other weapon enchant for that matter, but obviously Blood Flame Blade is by far the strongest. So you can make up a high strength build, apply this Ash of War with a heavy affinity or any other type of non-magical affinity, so that this will leave room to apply the Blood Flame Blade alongside with this. This results in being able to deal extremely high damage, setting the enemies on fire, and if that was not enough, all of these damage sources, including the damage sticks that you get from the spawning lava, are more than capable to count towards the Blood Flame procs. The other reason this is amazing is also because it gets to stun enemies, or at the very least interrupts them. It works great both against small fry enemies like for example Malenia, who for some reason constantly runs away from battle. Yeah, you can easily interrupt her and eventually even stun her. But it also works against larger bosses, and it's definitely satisfying every single time you pull this off. That's why you also want to couple this with a couple of options. In this case, if range is no concern, then it's best coupled with a Great Stars, as that one also has innate bleed and works wonderful with this setup. Otherwise, if that is a concern, you can place it on something like a Colossal Greatsword to have more reach, and it's especially useful against Malenia, who tends to run a lot in battle, as I've said. Now, to find this, you can easily acquire this from Bernal once you reach the Volcano Manor and have completed at least one of their contracts over there. It sells for about 8,000 runes, but it's totally worth every single one of them. Now, moving on to number 3, the next Ash of War does not require an introduction. This is the Thunderbolt, and of course, it's one of the most absurdly spammable spells in both PvE and PvP. You basically cast down a bolt of lightning, dealing almost instant damage and being fireball in rapid succession. Yeah, kinda always going up for thousands of damage. The reason this Ash of War is special isn't because of the damage, but it's because it seems to scale much better if you set the affinity to keen rather than lightning. So as you can see, the difference right here with the unbuffed version, in this case with a non-min maxed build, is quite noticeable from 769 to 819 between these two types of affinities, in the favor of course of the keen one. So a high dexterity build that already has a lot of points into dexterity will almost always want to also use this, and yeah, get an additional range capability in the setup, even deal damage from afar, even if you like don't fully spec into spell damage. This also leaves a lot of room for extra weapon buffs. In this case, you can totally go with an electrify armament and just go with the full theme over here, or go with a hybrid that specializes a bit more into faith, not just dexterity, and maybe add a flame grant me strength in the mix, maybe even a golden vow if you also plan to use weapon damage, especially since yeah, enemies can get close to you and you won't have enough time to cast the Thunderbolt. Now, to get this, you need to head over to the Avenue balcony in Lanedale, head downstairs, and then take the left right here by following the edge, right up until the next group of enemies, to the point that you'll want to jump on these rooftops, and then down until you see this rolling beetle. Holding it and defeating it will give you the Thunderbolt. Now, moving on to number 2, the next one is going to be the Golden Land. This is another holy ability that has great interactions with armament enchants. With this ability, you get to smash your weapon into the ground, creating a powerful holy explosion that also spawns a series of golden arrows that will follow the enemy and deal extra damage, similar to the Earth Tree mini bosses that you encountered so many times. On its own, it's already a really great skill, was also buffed quite recently, but you get to deal damage both from the initial weapon thrust, the ensuing holy damage, and the final projectiles. Its most important secret is the fact that yeah, those extra golden projectiles do benefit from build-up bonuses that you have upon your weapons, including, yes, you guessed it, the Blood Flame Blade. So again, applying this to a non-magical affinity weapon according to your highest stat, in this case for me it was strength, so I went with that heavy affinity, meant that I was able to also apply a Blood Flame Blade to further nuke bosses, even with the additional projectiles. This again works really well with something like the Great Stars that already has innate bleed on it, so you can further buff that with that enchant, but it's also amazing at stunning bosses. It takes no more than a few explosions to do that, and from this point on you can literally aim it at their head to finish off the job. Oh, and it's also pretty great at throwing enemies back in case you're surrounded and if you go up against multiple enemies at the same time. Now, to find this, you need to head over to the Great Waterfalls Site of Grace in the Deep Root Depths, take the road west past this Earth Tree enemy in the area until you find these kind of like trees over here. There's going to be a rolling beetle between them, and taking it down will obviously give you the Ash of War. Finally, this brings us to our number 1 option, and that's going to be the Ice Spear, a really awesome ranged option as it is for mages, and it kind of already has everything like damage, quite a bit of range, frost build-up, and it's also able to stun enemies. But normally you'd be tempted to just put this on a mage and forget about it. Well, that would be the wrong way of playing with it, because its secret is the fact that it totally benefits from an ability like the Shared Order, which is also an Ash of War, so you can totally apply it on a secondary weapon. This is to not be confused with the Sacred Order that we covered at the start of the video. Unlike that ability, this will apply the buff to your character, not the weapon, which means you will still retain the buff even if you completely switch out that weapon. And its effect, which provides additional holy damage, does indeed work with the magical projectile, in the sense that you can buff yourself up with the shared order, then switch to your lance and use the ice spear to totally get not just the ice damage but also the holy damage on top. This will be especially noticeable against undead enemies, as now you will literally deal almost double the damage you normally do with the same ice spear, and it also gets to completely remove their spawn, so you literally kill them in one shot. This is especially amazing against some of the death right enemies in case you're having any trouble with them, but I've also found it to be amazing at just stunning enemies. It takes about 4 shots at the max to fully stun somebody by the time you already get an explosion from the frostbite too, so that's also a nice burst of damage. All in all, a really amazing Ash of War, but as I've said, totally let me know down below in the comments which one of these interactions or Ashes of War were your favorite. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.